My name is Neil Carter, and for 31 days, I've been a ghost in my own house. Not the friendly Casper kind, more like the type that rattles chains and makes people's skin crawl. It started the night of Andrea's law firm Christmas party. My wife stumbled through our front door at 3 in the morning, lipstick smeared across her face like abstract art, designer dress wrinkled beyond recognition, wearing that particular glow that comes from too much champagne and too many compliments from the wrong person. The next morning, she looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet she'd been meaning to scrub out. "Morning, honey," I said, holding up her favorite coffee mug, the one with world's best mom that Chloe gave her 5 years ago. "Made it just how you like it." Andrea walked past me like I was invisible. She grabbed a disposable cup instead, poured her own coffee with deliberate slowness, and left without a single word. The mug sat there in my hand, growing cold while I wondered if I'd accidentally slipped into some alternate dimension where 40-year-old architects simply ceased to exist. That was day 1. If you're enjoying this story of revenge and revelation, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a like and comment below with what you think Neil should do next. Now, back to Neil's journey from invisible to unforgettable. By day 10, I'd tried everything. Flowers on the kitchen counter, wilted and thrown away without comment. Her favorite Chinese takeout, eaten while she scrolled through her phone, never once making eye contact. I even attempted the classic "we need to talk" approach, which earned me the kind of look usually reserved for persistent telemarketers. "Andrea, what's happening? Did I do something wrong?" I asked one evening, my voice embarrassingly desperate. She sipped her wine, eyes fixed on some legal drama, and turned up the volume. The message was crystal clear. I was less interesting than fictional lawyers arguing fictional cases. Our daughter Chloe, 22 and home from law school, had joined the conspiracy. She'd always been Andrea's shadow, but now she actively avoided me like I carried some contagious disease. When I asked about her engagement party planning, she mumbled something about mom handling everything and disappeared upstairs. The house felt like a museum where I was the only exhibit nobody wanted to see. By day 15, I'd developed a theory. Andrea's boss, Mark Feldman, or Pumper as the office secretly called him for reasons I preferred not to contemplate, had been particularly attentive at the Christmas party. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confidence that comes from inherited money and inherited arrogance. He'd monopolized Andrea's time that night, whispering in her ear while his wife mingled obliviously across the room. I'd watched them dance, his hand sliding lower on her back than professional courtesy typically allows. When I'd approached, Mark had given me that politician's smile, the kind they use on constituents they'll never remember. "Neil, great party, isn't it?" he'd said, clapping my shoulder. "Your wife's been telling me about your little architecture projects." Little projects. Like the hospital renovation that won 3 state awards was something I'd built with Lincoln logs. Now, sitting in my home office while my family conducted their lives around me like I was a particularly unremarkable houseplant, I was connecting dots that formed a picture I desperately didn't want to see. The evidence was subtle but damning. Andrea's phone, previously as accessible as a library book, now required a password she changed weekly. Her work clothes had upgraded from professional to provocative. She'd started going to the gym at 6 in the morning, a woman who once considered walking to the mailbox adequate cardio. Most telling were the conversations I overheard when her friends visited. Jess and Lauren, her inner circle of gossip and enablement, would cluster in the kitchen with wine and whispered secrets. "You're absolutely glowing," Jess had said last Tuesday, her voice carrying that particular tone women use when fishing for intimate details. "Just taking better care of myself," Andrea replied. But I heard the smile in her voice, the satisfaction. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. You look 10 years younger." "Some things are worth the extra effort," Andrea had said, and they'd all laughed like they were sharing the world's best inside joke. I'd been making myself a sandwich in the adjacent dining room, invisible as always, when Lauren chimed in with a giggle. "Speaking of effort, how's the situation with you-know-who?" "Complicated," Andrea had answered. "But manageable." Complicated. Manageable. Like I was a minor scheduling conflict rather than her husband of 18 years. The breaking point came on day 28. I was doing laundry, a task that had somehow become my exclusive responsibility during the month of silence, when I found them. Cufflinks. In Andrea's blouse pocket. Gold, expensive, engraved with the initials M.F. Mark Feldman. I held them up to the light, these little pieces of evidence that confirmed what I'd been trying not to believe. My wife was having an affair with her boss, and she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The cufflinks were like a taunt, a dare, a challenge to my manhood that assumed I was too weak or too stupid to respond. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in the laundry room, surrounded by the domestic debris of a marriage that had apparently ended without anyone bothering to inform me. The sound echoed off the walls, hollow and bitter. "At least she's not subtle," I said to the empty room. That night, I sat in my office and made a list. Not a grocery list or a honey-do list, but an inventory of my life. 40 years old. Successful architect. Faithful husband. Involved father. I'd built a good life, a stable life, the kind of life that looked perfect in Christmas card photos. My wife was entertaining her boss with his cufflinks in her pockets. My daughter treated me like an embarrassing relative. My friends, our friends, had mysteriously stopped calling. Even Pete, my college roommate and closest friend, hadn't returned my messages in 2 weeks. I was being erased. Systematically, deliberately, completely. The question wasn't why anymore. The question was what I was going to do about it. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not a letter, not a plea, not an ultimatum. A plan. Because if they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I was going to give them exactly what they wished for. But first, I was going to make sure they remembered why they should have paid attention in the first place. The cufflink sat on my desk, catching the light from my computer screen. M.F. Mark Feldman. Pumper. The man who'd reduced my marriage to a scheduling conflict and my existence to an inconvenience. Tomorrow was day 29. I had 2 days left to decide whether to fight for a life that no longer wanted me, or to disappear so completely that they'd spend the rest of their lives wondering where I went. I picked up the cufflinks and dropped them in my desk drawer. Evidence. Ammunition. A reminder that sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply giving people exactly what they think they want. The house was quiet around me, my family sleeping peacefully in their beds, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would be just like today. That I would still be here, still be invisible, still be manageable. They were wrong. Day 31 arrived with all the fanfare of a tax audit. I woke up in my office chair, neck stiff from sleeping at my desk, surrounded by architectural blueprints that had once defined my identity. Outside, Boston was waking up to another gray February morning. Inside, my family was preparing for another day of pretending I didn't exist. I could hear them in the kitchen. Andrea's heels clicking on the hardwood like a countdown. Chloe's animated voice discussing engagement party details. "The caterer wants final numbers by Friday," Chloe was saying. "Should I count, Dad?" A pause. A long, deliberate pause that spoke volumes. "Let's keep it flexible," Andrea replied, her voice carrying that careful neutrality she used in depositions. "You know how unpredictable he's been lately." Unpredictable. That was rich, coming from a woman who'd spent the last month conducting a clandestine affair with all the discretion of a circus parade. I stood up, joints protesting, and caught my reflection in the window. Rumpled shirt, day-old stubble, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and processed too little. I looked exactly like what I was, a man who'd been systematically dismantled by people who were supposed to love him. The shower was my sanctuary, the one place where hot water could wash away the accumulated humiliation of 31 days. But even there, I couldn't escape the evidence of my wife's betrayal. Her shampoo bottles had multiplied, expensive brands I didn't recognize. A new razor, pink and pristine, sat beside my old electric one like a declaration of independence. When I emerged, the house was empty. No goodbye, no note, no acknowledgement that I existed enough to warrant basic courtesy. Just the lingering scent of Andrea's new perfume and coffee dregs in a sink full of dishes that were apparently my responsibility. I called Pete again. You've reached Pete Morrison. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. Maybe. Pete, it's Neil again. Look, I know you're busy, but I really need to talk to someone who remembers I exist. Call me back, please. I hung up and stared at my phone, willing it to ring. It didn't. Work was my refuge, the one place where my professional competence still mattered. Carter and Associates occupied the third floor of a renovated warehouse in Cambridge, and my small team of designers and drafters treated me with a respect that had vanished from my personal life. "Morning, Neil," called Janet, my project manager, her smile genuine. "The hospital board approved the final revisions. They want to move forward with construction next month." "That's excellent news," I said, and meant it. At least something in my life was functioning properly. I buried myself in blueprints and building codes, losing hours in the precise world of measurements and materials. Here, problems had solutions. Stress calculations were predictable. Load-bearing walls didn't suddenly decide to ignore you for a month. But even work couldn't completely distract me from the growing certainty that my marriage was over. The question was whether I'd go quietly or make some noise on my way out. My phone buzzed. A text from Andrea. "Chloe's engagement party is Saturday. Try to be presentable. Try to be presentable." Like I was a distant relative with questionable hygiene rather than the father of the bride-to-be. I typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." But even as I sent the message, I was already planning something different. Saturday night arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if even the weather was conspiring to make the evening memorable. Chloe had chosen the Fairmont Copley Plaza for her engagement party. Elegant, expensive, and exactly the kind of venue that announced serious money and serious intentions. I arrived fashionably late, wearing my best suit and the kind of confidence that comes from having nothing left to lose. The ballroom was packed with Boston's legal and social elite, the kind of people who measured success in billable hours and vacation home square footage. Andrea stood near the bar, radiant in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was holding court with her usual crowd, Jess, Lauren, and Tony, Mark's friend and enabler. They were laughing at something, wine glasses catching the light, perfectly manicured hands gesturing with practiced elegance. And there, standing just close enough to suggest intimacy without confirming it, was Mark Feldman. Pumper himself, silver-haired and smug, wearing cufflinks that probably matched the ones I'd found in my wife's pocket. I watched them for a moment, studying the dynamics. The way Mark's hand brushed Andrea's lower back when he reached for his drink. The way she leaned into him when he whispered something in her ear. The way they moved together like dance partners who'd been practicing in private. "Dad, you made it." Chloe appeared at my elbow, beautiful in a blue cocktail dress that made her look older than her 22 years. I was starting to worry. "Wouldn't miss my daughter's engagement party," I said, kissing her cheek. "Where's the lucky guy?" "James is over by the windows talking to some law school friends. Come on, I'll introduce you." But I wasn't ready for small talk with my future son-in-law. I was focused on the tableau near the bar, where my wife was publicly flirting with her boss while their friends provided cover and encouragement. "In a minute, sweetheart. I want to say hello to your mother first." Chloe's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something that might have been concern or embarrassment. "Dad, maybe." "It's fine," I interrupted gently. "We're all adults here." I walked toward the bar with the measured pace of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Conversations paused as I approached, the kind of social radar that kicks in when potential drama enters the vicinity. "Andrea," I said, my voice carrying just enough to be heard by the surrounding group. "You look absolutely stunning tonight." She turned, and for just a moment, I saw genuine surprise in her eyes, as if she'd forgotten I was capable of appearing in public without advanced warning and careful management. "Neil," she said, recovering quickly, her professional mask sliding into place. "I'm glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I repeated, then turned to Mark with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Pumper. Good to see you again. How's Margaret?" Mark's wife. The woman who was presumably at home while her husband played footsie with my wife at our daughter's engagement party. Mark's smile faltered slightly. She couldn't make it tonight. Prior commitment. That's too bad, I said, letting the silence stretch. I'm sure she would have enjoyed seeing how close everyone's become. The silence that followed was the kind that makes people reach for their drinks and suddenly find fascinating conversations happening across the room. Jess and Lauren exchanged glances. Tony cleared his throat and mumbled something about finding the restroom. Andrea's eyes narrowed dangerously. Neil, maybe we should dance, I interrupted smoothly. What a wonderful idea. Before she could protest, I took her hand and led her toward the small dance floor where other couples were swaying to the jazz quartet's rendition of standards that were old when our parents were young. Andrea followed, probably because refusing would have created exactly the kind of scene she'd been working so hard to avoid. We moved together stiffly, like strangers at a wedding, which wasn't far from the truth. What are you doing? She hissed, her smile never wavering for the benefit of watching eyes. Dancing with my wife at my daughter's engagement party, I said calmly. Shocking behavior, I know. Don't be ridiculous. You know what I mean. Actually, I don't. I haven't known what you mean for 31 days. But I'm starting to figure it out. Her grip on my shoulder tightened. This isn't the place for whatever you think you're doing. What I think I'm doing is trying to understand why my wife has been ignoring me for a month while entertaining her boss. Found his cufflinks in your pocket, by the way. MF, very subtle. Andrea missed a step, her composure cracking just enough to let me see the calculation behind her eyes. She was trying to decide whether to deny, deflect, or attack. I waited, curious to see which strategy she'd choose. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally. Denial it was. MF, I said quietly. Gold. Expensive. Found them in your blouse pocket when I was doing laundry. You know, that domestic task that somehow became my exclusive responsibility when you decided I was invisible. The song ended, but we kept moving, locked in our private confrontation while the world swirled around us. You're being paranoid, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been conducting a very public affair while treating me like I'm some kind of embarrassing relative you're hoping will disappear. Keep your voice down, she hissed. Why? Afraid your friends might find out what kind of person you really are. That hit home. Andrea's face flushed, and for a moment, I saw something raw and ugly in her expression. Not guilt or remorse, but anger at being caught. You want to do this here, she said, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. Fine. Yes, Mark and I have grown close. Yes, I've been distant with you. And yes, I think it's time we talked about what our marriage has become. What it's become. Or what you've turned it into. What I've turned it into. Her voice rose slightly before she caught herself. Neil, when's the last time you looked at me? Really looked at me? When's the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about your work or your projects or your needs? When's the last time you gave me the chance? I've been trying to get your attention for trying. You've been so wrapped up in your blueprints and your buildings that you forgot you had a wife. It was a masterful performance, turning my month of isolation into evidence of my own neglect. Rewriting history to make her betrayal my fault. I almost admired the audacity. So you decided to get Mark's attention instead. Mark sees me, she said, her eyes bright with defiance. Mark appreciates me. Mark treats me like I matter. Tell me, when's the last time you brought me flowers without it being an apology for something? When's the last time you planned a surprise, took me somewhere special? She had a point, and we both knew it. I had gotten comfortable, taken her for granted, assumed that 18 years of marriage meant we'd moved past the need for grand gestures. But that didn't justify what she'd done. It didn't excuse the month of silence, the public humiliation, the systematic erasure of my existence while she conducted her affair under my nose. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to have an affair and freeze me out of my own life. I decided to find someone who makes me feel alive again, she said, meeting my eyes with disturbing honesty. The truth was brutal and liberating. No more pretense, no more games. Just the raw acknowledgement that my wife had fallen out of love with me and into bed with her boss. Where does that leave us? I asked. I don't know, she said, and for the first time, I heard uncertainty in her voice. Where do you want it to leave us? I looked around the ballroom at the glittering crowd. At Chloe laughing with her fiancé, at Mark watching us from the bar with barely concealed anxiety, at the life I'd built that was crumbling around me while everyone pretended not to notice. I want to leave us with some dignity, I said finally. What does that mean? It means I'm done being invisible. It means I'm done being manageable. And it means you're about to find out what happens when you ignore someone for so long that they stop caring about your feelings. I released her and stepped back, leaving her standing alone on the dance floor. The jazz quartet was playing something slow and melancholy, perfect background music for the end of a marriage. I walked back to the bar where Mark was trying to look casual, while obviously straining to overhear our conversation. "Pump her," I said, loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. "Thanks for taking such good care of my wife while I've been working. I hope Margaret appreciates your dedication to client relations." Mark's face went pale. Around us, the social elite of Boston's legal community began to pay very close attention to what was shaping up to be the evening's entertainment. "Neil," Mark said carefully, setting down his drink with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "I think there might be some misunderstanding." "Oh, there's no misunderstanding," I said clearly. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you've been conducting a very unprofessional relationship with a married employee. I understand that you've been using your position to manipulate someone's wife. And I understand that your own wife might be very interested to learn about your extracurricular activities." The silence that followed was deafening. Phones appeared, fingers poised over social media apps. This was exactly the kind of scandal that would dominate legal community gossip for months. Mark looked around desperately, realizing that his reputation was about to become collateral damage in my marital meltdown. "I think you should leave," he said quietly, trying to salvage some control. "You think I should leave?" I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "This is my daughter's engagement party, celebrating my future son-in-law, attended by friends who used to be mine before they decided I was too boring to acknowledge. But you think I should leave? Neil, please." Andrea appeared at my elbow, her face flushed with embarrassment and fury. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene? I've been invisible for 31 days while you conducted a public affair, and now I'm making a scene." Chloe materialized beside us, her face stricken. "Dad, what's going on?" I looked at my daughter, beautiful and innocent, caught in the middle of her parents' spectacular implosion. For a moment, my anger faltered. This wasn't her fault. She didn't deserve to have her engagement party turned into a battleground. "Nothing, sweetheart," I said, my voice gentling. "Just some adult conversation that got a little heated." "Maybe we should take this somewhere private," James, her fiancé, suggested diplomatically, his hand on Chloe's shoulder. "Maybe we should," I agreed. "But first, I have something to say." I turned to address the crowd that had gathered to watch the show. Lawyers, judges, social climbers, and gossip collectors, all waiting to see how this would end. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my voice just enough to carry across the ballroom. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my daughter's engagement. Chloe and James, I wish you a lifetime of happiness, honesty, and mutual respect. May your marriage be everything mine was supposed to be." I kissed Chloe's cheek, shook James's hand, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of whispered conversations, the social equivalent of wildfire spreading through dry grass. At the door, I turned back for one last look. Andrea stood frozen by the bar, Mark beside her, both of them realizing that their secret was now the most public thing in the room. Chloe was crying. James was trying to salvage the party. And the cream of Boston's legal society was already composing the texts and emails that would spread this story across the city by morning. I'd wanted to make some noise on my way out. Mission accomplished. Part 5. The Marriott downtown became my temporary headquarters, a sterile sanctuary where I could plan my next move without the suffocating presence of my former life. Room 847 overlooked the harbor, and I spent the first morning watching ships navigate the channel while I navigated the wreckage of my marriage. My phone had been buzzing constantly since the engagement party disaster. 17 missed calls from Andrea, 12 from Chloe, and surprisingly, 3 from Pete. I'd been ignoring them all, but Pete's persistence finally wore me down. Jesus Christ, Neil, where the hell have you been? His voice carried the kind of concern that only comes from genuine friendship. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I've been calling you too, I said. You never returned my messages. What messages? I never got any. Oh wait, Margaret's been handling my phone while I was in the hospital. Appendix surgery, complications, the whole nightmare. She must have deleted them, thinking they were work calls. Hospital. That explained the silence from my oldest friend during the month when I'd needed him most. Are you okay? I asked. I'm fine now, but Neil, I just heard about the engagement party. Half of Boston's legal community is talking about it. What the hell happened? I told him everything. The month of silence, the affair, the cufflinks, the public confrontation. Pete listened without interruption, occasionally making the kind of disgusted noises that confirmed I wasn't crazy. So what's your plan? He asked when I finished. I don't have one yet. I'm staying at the Marriott while I figure out my next move. The Marriott? Neil, you can't live in a hotel room. Come stay with Margaret and me. I appreciate the offer, but I need space to think. I need to decide whether I'm going to fight for this marriage or just walk away. What's to fight for? Pete's voice was incredulous. She's been screwing her boss and treating you like furniture. Cut your losses and move on. It's not that simple. There's Chloe. The house. 18 years of shared history. 18 years of history that she was willing to throw away for some silver-haired sleazeball. Neil, you need to stop thinking like a husband and start thinking like a survivor. Pete was right. But admitting it meant acknowledging that the life I'd built was over. That the woman I'd loved had become someone I didn't recognize. I need to see a lawyer, I said. I know someone. Diane Murphy, divorce specialist. Tougher than a $2 steak. She'll protect your interests while Andrea's busy protecting her reputation. Set it up. After hanging up, I sat in the hotel room's generic chair and took inventory of my situation. 40 years old, successful architect, soon to be divorced, with a daughter who probably thought I'd lost my mind and a wife who'd already moved on to her next chapter. But I wasn't defeated. Humiliated, yes. Betrayed, absolutely. But not defeated. I opened my laptop and began researching Mark Feldman. If Andrea wanted to play games, I needed to understand the rules and the players. Pumper's professional biography read like a textbook example of inherited privilege. Harvard Law, family connections, partnership track at one of Boston's most prestigious firms. Married to Margaret Whitman Feldman, daughter of a federal judge, mother of 2, patron of various charitable organizations. His social media presence was carefully curated, photos from charity galas, sailing trips, family vacations in Martha's Vineyard. The picture of a successful man living a successful life with a successful wife who clearly had no idea her husband was conducting extracurricular activities with his employees. I found Andrea's profiles too, studying them like evidence in a case I was building against my own life. Her posts from the past month told a story of professional success and personal satisfaction. Photos from office parties, quotes about embracing change, inspirational messages about finding your authentic self. Nothing about her husband. Nothing about our marriage. Nothing to suggest I'd ever existed at all. The erasure was complete and deliberate. My phone rang. Chloe's number. Dad, please talk to me. I don't understand what happened at the party. Your mother didn't explain it to you? She said you've been under a lot of stress at work and you misunderstood some things. But Dad, the way you looked at her, the things you said to Mr. Feldman, that wasn't stress. That was something else. Chloe had always been perceptive. Even as a child, she could read people's emotions like other kids read picture books. Your mother and I are having some problems, I said carefully. Are you getting divorced? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was just starting to burn. I don't know yet. Dad, I love you, but what you did at my engagement party was wrong. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed James. You embarrassed everyone there. She was right. And the guilt hit me like a physical blow. In my rage and humiliation, I turned my daughter's special evening into a public spectacle. I'm sorry, sweetheart. You're absolutely right. I should have handled things differently. Then why didn't you? Because I've been invisible in my own house for a month, and I guess I wanted to make sure people remembered I exist. A long pause. When Chloe spoke again, her voice was softer, more vulnerable. Dad, are you okay? Really okay? I'm working on it. Where are you staying? A hotel downtown. Don't worry about me, Chloe. Focus on your wedding planning and your fiancé. This is between your mother and me. It's not that simple. You're my parents. What happens to you happens to me too. After we hung up, I sat staring out at the harbor again. Ships coming and going, following channels that had been mapped by other navigators. I needed my own navigation system. My own warning lights. Diane Murphy's office occupied the top floor of a glass tower in the financial district, with views that commanded respect and fees that commanded attention. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made opposing counsel nervous. Pete Morrison says you need help with a divorce, she said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. I'm not sure yet if I want a divorce, but I want to understand my options. Tell me about your situation. I gave her the abbreviated version, the month of silence, the affair, the public confrontation. She took notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking questions that revealed the strategic mind behind the professional demeanor. How long have you suspected the affair? A few weeks. I found evidence last week. What kind of evidence? Cufflinks. His initials, in her pocket. That's circumstantial, but combined with the behavioral changes, it paints a picture. Do you have any financial evidence? Hotel receipts, credit card charges, unexplained expenses. I haven't looked. You need to look. If you decide to proceed with divorce, documentation will be crucial. Massachusetts is a no-fault state, but adultery can still impact alimony and asset division. What about my business? How is Carter and Associates structured? It's an LLC. I'm the sole owner, but I started it during the marriage with some joint funds. That complicates things. Your wife may have a claim to part of the business value. We'd need to get it appraised, look at the financial records, determine what portion represents marital assets versus separate property. The conversation continued for an hour, covering the practical mechanics of dismantling a life, asset division, custody arrangements, spousal support, tax implications. What's your timeline? Diane asked as we wrapped up. I don't have one. I'm still processing all of this. Don't process too long. The longer you wait, the more time your wife has to prepare her own strategy. And from what you've told me, she's already several moves ahead. That evening, I sat in the hotel bar nursing a whiskey and thinking about chess games and strategic thinking. Andrea had been planning this for months, maybe longer. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk tomorrow. 10 a.m. Public Garden. Come alone. Mark. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, we have nothing to discuss. Please, this has gone too far. I can explain everything. Explain it to your wife. My phone rang immediately. Mark's number. Neil, please. Just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain what? How you've been screwing my wife while I was working to support her lifestyle. How you used your position to manipulate an employee. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The only question is what I'm going to do about it. A pause. When Mark spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, more desperate. What do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that treating people like they're disposable is a dangerous game. And I want you to start worrying about what happens when someone decides they're done being invisible. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. There's a difference. I hung up and ordered another whiskey. Around me, the hotel bar buzzed with the conversations of business travelers and tourists, people passing through Boston on their way to somewhere else. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Pete. How did the lawyer meeting go? Educational. She thinks Andrea's been planning this for a while. Smart woman. What's your next move? I looked around the bar at the anonymous faces and temporary conversations. I'm going to disappear, I said. What do you mean, disappear? I mean I'm going to become invisible again. But this time it's going to be my choice. And when I'm ready to reappear, it's going to be on my terms. That sounds ominous. It sounds strategic. After hanging up, I sat in the bar until closing time, planning my disappearance. Not a physical vanishing act, but something more subtle and more devastating. I was going to become the ghost in their machine, the shadow in their success story, the reminder that ignoring someone doesn't make them go away, it just makes them dangerous. 3 weeks into my strategic invisibility, I'd learned something important about Boston's legal community. They gossiped like teenagers and had memories like elephants. The engagement party incident had become legend, growing more dramatic with each retelling until I was practically a folk hero of marital revenge. My new apartment in Back Bay was a deliberate choice, close enough to my old life to stay informed, far enough away to maintain operational distance. The furnished one-bedroom came with everything I needed and nothing I didn't. Carter and Associates was thriving. The hospital project had led to 3 new contracts, and my team was working overtime to keep up with demand. Success, it turned out, was an excellent distraction from personal destruction. Neil, you seem different lately, Janet observed during our weekly project review. More focused. More determined. Divorce will do that to you, I said. Clarifies priorities. Are you really getting divorced? That remains to be seen. What remained to be seen was whether Andrea and Mark were prepared for the kind of focused attention I was about to give them. I'd hired a private investigator for strategic intelligence. Rebecca Chen was a former police detective who specialized in corporate investigations, and her report on Mark Feldman made for fascinating reading. Pumper's marriage to Margaret wasn't the society success story it appeared to be. They'd been living essentially separate lives for years. More interesting was his financial situation. Despite his prestigious position, Mark was leveraged to the hilt. The Martha's Vineyard house was mortgaged. The Boston condo carried a second loan. He's living beyond his means, Rebecca explained during our meeting at a coffee shop in Harvard Square. Classic case of keeping up appearances while the foundation crumbles underneath. What about his position at the firm? Secure for now, but there have been rumors about partnership restructuring. Some of the older partners want to bring in younger talent. Mark's been feeling the pressure. And Andrea, she's been positioning herself as indispensable to his practice. Handles his biggest clients, manages his calendar. If he goes down, she goes with him. Unless she finds a way to distance herself from the wreckage. Exactly. She's smart, ambitious, and ruthless. The affair might be emotional, but it's also strategic. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing Rebecca's files and planning my next move. Andrea and Mark thought they were playing a sophisticated game. They had no idea they were about to become pawns in a much larger game. My phone rang. Chloe's number. Dad, we need to talk. What's wrong? Mom's been asking questions about your business. Financial questions. She wants to know about your client contracts, your revenue projections, your partnership structure. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What kind of questions? The kind that sound like she's planning something. Dad, I think she's going to try to take part of your company in the divorce. Did she ask you to find out this information? A pause. She said she was just trying to understand our family's financial situation. But Dad, the way she was asking, it felt wrong. What did you tell her? Nothing. I don't know anything about your business anyway. But I wanted to warn you. After hanging up, I called Diane Murphy's emergency line. They're moving faster than we expected, I told her. My wife is already gathering information about my business assets. That's not unusual in divorce proceedings, but if she's doing it through your daughter, that suggests she's trying to avoid formal discovery processes. What does that mean? It means she's planning to file soon, and she wants to have her ammunition ready. Neil, you need to make a decision. Do you want to file first, or do you want to wait and respond to her petition? What's the advantage of filing first? You control the narrative. You set the terms of engagement. And you get to choose the timing. I thought about Andrea's strategic mind, her legal training, her network of professional contacts. She'd been planning this campaign while I was still trying to understand the rules. File the papers, I said. Are you sure? I'm sure. But I want to do it my way, on my timeline. What does that mean? It means I want to coordinate the filing with some other activities I have planned. Neil, whatever you're thinking, make sure it's legal and ethical. I won't be party to anything that could backfire in court. Don't worry. Everything I'm planning is completely above board. It's just going to be very, very public. The next morning, I put the second phase of my plan into motion. I'd been invited to speak at the New England Architecture Conference, a prestigious event that drew professionals from across the region. The conference was being held at the Boston Convention Center with an expected attendance of over 500 architects, engineers, and construction professionals. The kind of audience that included potential clients, industry leaders, and people who controlled millions of dollars in construction contracts. My presentation was scheduled for 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. At exactly the same time, Diane Murphy would be filing my divorce petition at Suffolk County Probate Court. The timing wasn't coincidental. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday refining my presentation, making sure every slide was perfect, every transition smooth, every point clearly articulated. This wasn't just about professional success. It was about establishing my credibility at the exact moment my personal life became public knowledge. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made Boston look like a postcard. I dressed carefully, my best suit, lucky tie, shoes polished to a mirror shine. The convention center was buzzing with activity when I arrived. Registration tables, vendor booths, networking conversations, the familiar energy of professionals gathering to share knowledge. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane. Papers filed at 1:47 p.m. It's official. I was now legally separated, officially ending 18 years of marriage with a court filing that would become public record within hours. At 2 o'clock, I walked onto the main stage and looked out at an audience of my peers. 500 faces, some familiar, some unknown, all focused on what I was about to say. Good afternoon, I began, my voice steady and clear. I'm Neil Carter, principal architect at Carter & Associates, and I'm here to talk about innovation in hospital design. But before we discuss buildings, I want to talk about foundations. I clicked to my first slide, a photo of a construction site showing deep excavation and steel reinforcement. Every great building starts with a foundation that can support whatever you plan to build on top of it. The foundation has to be solid, properly engineered, and built to last. because if the foundation fails, everything else comes down with it. The audience was with me, nodding along. The same principle applies to professional relationships, business partnerships, and personal integrity. You build your reputation on a foundation of trust, competence, and ethical behavior. I clicked to the next slide, the completed hospital, gleaming in afternoon sunlight. This project succeeded because everyone involved maintained their professional standards. No one cut corners. No one compromised their ethics. And no one betrayed the trust that made the collaboration possible. Another click. This slide showed the project timeline, budget targets, and quality metrics. But what happens when someone in the collaboration decides that personal gain is more important than professional integrity? What happens when trust is broken? When ethical standards are compromised? The audience was still with me, but I could sense a shift. This was starting to sound less like a technical presentation and more like something else. In construction, we call it structural failure. When one element fails, it creates stress on all the other elements. Sometimes the structure can be repaired. Sometimes it has to be demolished and rebuilt from the ground up. I clicked to a new slide, a photo of a building collapse, twisted steel and scattered concrete. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today as someone whose personal foundation has experienced catastrophic failure. As of 1 hour ago, I filed for divorce from my wife of 18 years, ending a marriage that was destroyed by professional misconduct and personal betrayal. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. 500 professionals sat frozen, realizing they were witnessing something unprecedented. My wife, Andrea Carter, is a manager at Feldman, Morrison & Associates, one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. For the past several months, she has been conducting an affair with her supervisor, Mark Feldman, a married partner at the firm. This relationship represents a clear violation of professional ethics, workplace policies, and basic human decency. Phones appeared throughout the audience. This was the kind of moment that would be recorded, shared, and discussed for years. I'm sharing this information not for sympathy, but for education. Because we work in a professional community where reputation matters, where trust is essential, and where ethical behavior is the foundation of successful collaboration. When someone violates those standards, it affects all of us. I clicked to my final slide, the Carter & Associates logo. My marriage may have failed, but my commitment to professional excellence remains unchanged. Carter & Associates will continue to deliver innovative design solutions built on a foundation of trust, competence, and ethical behavior. Because when everything else falls apart, your professional reputation is what allows you to rebuild. I stepped back from the podium. Thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to take questions about hospital design, structural engineering, or the importance of maintaining professional standards in all aspects of our work. The applause that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not just polite acknowledgement, but something deeper. Recognition, respect, and admiration for someone who'd turned personal disaster into professional triumph. The questions that followed were sharp, technical, and focused on the architectural innovations that had made my hospital project successful. No one asked about my personal situation. They didn't need to. As I left the stage, my phone was already buzzing with messages, reporters, colleagues, potential clients. But the message that mattered most came from Pete. Holy hell, Neil. You just became a legend. That evening, I sat in my apartment and watched the story spread across social media like wildfire. Architectural integrity was trending. LinkedIn was buzzing with discussions about professional ethics. The Boston Business Journal had already published an online story about my unprecedented conference presentation. My phone rang. Andrea's number. What have you done? Her voice was shaking with rage and panic. I've told the truth, I said calmly. You've destroyed everything, my career, my reputation, my future. You destroyed those things when you decided to have an affair with your boss. I just made sure everyone knew about it. This is insane. This is cruel and vindictive. This is consequences. I interrupted. You spent a month treating me like I was invisible, conducting a public affair while pretending I didn't exist. Now you get to experience what it feels like when everyone's watching. Neil, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can. It's too late for that. The divorce papers were filed an hour before my presentation. This marriage is over. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply refusing to be invisible anymore. I hung up and poured myself a whiskey, settling into my chair to watch the harbor lights reflect off the water. Somewhere across the city, Andrea and Mark were dealing with the aftermath of my very public revelation. Their secret was now the most discussed topic in Boston's professional community. Tomorrow, there would be more consequences, more revelations, more strategic moves in the game they'd started but I was now controlling. But tonight, I was content to sit in my apartment and enjoy the view. For the first time in months, I felt visible again. And I was just getting started. The fallout from my conference presentation was swift and comprehensive. Within 24 hours, the story had spread beyond Boston's architectural community to the broader professional network. Mark Feldman was suspended pending an internal investigation at his firm. Andrea was placed on administrative leave. Their affair, once a carefully managed secret, was now the subject of gossip columns, professional ethics discussions, and workplace policy reviews. But I wasn't celebrating yet, because Rebecca Chen had called with information that changed everything. "We need to meet," she said, her voice unusually serious. "I found something about your wife that you need to see." We met at the same coffee shop in Harvard Square, but this time Rebecca looked different, more serious, more concerned. "Neil, I've been digging deeper into Andrea's background, and I found something that doesn't make sense." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were financial documents, college records, and what appeared to be police reports from 23 years ago. "What am I looking at?" "Your wife's college career at Boston University. Specifically, her senior year when she was accused of embezzling money from the student government organization she managed." I stared at the documents, trying to process what I was seeing. Accused. The charges were dropped. No prosecution, no conviction, no official record. But the internal investigation found evidence that she'd been skimming money from student activity funds for over a year. How much money? $47,000. Enough to pay for her law school applications, LSAT prep courses, and living expenses during her senior year. Why weren't charges filed? Her father intervened. He was a successful businessman with political connections. He made the money disappear, the investigation disappear, and the records disappear. Andrea graduated on schedule and went to law school as planned. I flipped through the documents, seeing my wife's name on investigation reports, witness statements, and financial audits that painted a picture of systematic theft and careful cover-up. "How did you find this?" "I have contacts in university administration. This kind of information doesn't really disappear. It just gets buried." "Does anyone else know about this?" "Not anymore. Everyone involved has moved on, retired, or passed away. Your wife probably thinks this is completely buried." I closed the folder and sat back. 23 years ago, Andrea had been a college student stealing money to fund her ambitions. Now she was a successful legal professional conducting an affair with her boss to advance her career. The pattern was clear. Andrea had always been willing to compromise ethics for personal gain. "What do you want to do with this information?" Rebecca asked. "I want to understand it first. This doesn't make sense with the woman I married." People change. Or maybe people hide who they really are until circumstances force the truth to surface. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing the documents and trying to reconcile this new information with 18 years of marriage. Had I been living with someone I never really knew? My phone rang. An unknown number. Neil Carter. "Yes. This is Margaret Feldman, Mark's wife. We need to talk." Margaret Feldman, the woman whose husband had been conducting an affair with my wife. Mrs. Feldman, I'm not sure what we have to discuss. We have plenty to discuss. Can you meet me tomorrow? Somewhere private. Why would you want to meet with me? Because we're both victims of the same deception, and I think we can help each other. The next afternoon, I met Margaret at a small restaurant in Beacon Hill, far from the legal district where her husband's career was imploding. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of understated elegance that comes from old money and good breeding. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure you would. I'm curious about what you think we have to discuss." "Our respective spouses' affair, obviously. But also something more complicated." She opened her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "I've been investigating Mark's activities for longer than you might think. The affair with your wife isn't his first extramarital relationship. It's just the most public." "You knew about the others?" "I suspected, but I needed proof before I could act. Your conference presentation gave me the leverage I needed to demand answers." She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, financial records, and private investigation reports. "Mark has been conducting affairs for years. Different women, different circumstances, but always the same pattern. He uses his position to manipulate employees, clients, and professional contacts." I looked through the photographs, Mark with various women at restaurants, hotels, and social events. The images were date-stamped going back almost 5 years. "Why didn't you confront him before?" "Because I was building a case. I wanted documentation, evidence, a complete picture of his behavior. I wanted to be able to destroy him completely when the time came. And now the time has come. Your wife made it public. She turned a private matter into a professional scandal. Now I can act without looking like a vindictive spouse." Margaret was playing a much more sophisticated game than I'd realized. While I'd been reacting to betrayal, she'd been strategically planning her revenge. "What do you want from me?" "Information about your wife's background, her motivations, her vulnerabilities. You know her better than anyone." I thought about the documents Rebecca had found, the college embezzlement that had been buried for over 2 decades. "What makes you think Andrea has vulnerabilities?" "Because no one conducts an affair this publicly unless they're desperate. Your wife wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was positioning herself to replace me in his life. That suggests someone with a very specific agenda." Margaret was right. Andrea's affair hadn't been just about romance. It had been about advancement, security, and social position. "What kind of information are you looking for?" "Financial irregularities, professional misconduct, anything that could be used to discredit her testimony if this becomes a legal matter." I made a decision that would change everything. "There might be something," I said. I told Margaret about the college embezzlement, the covered-up investigation, the pattern of ethical compromise that stretched back to Andrea's student days. Margaret listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed a sharp legal mind. "This is exactly what I needed," she said when I finished. "A historical pattern of financial misconduct, family connections used to avoid consequences, willingness to compromise ethics for personal gain." "What are you going to do with this information?" "I'm going to use it to ensure that your wife can never testify credibly against my husband in any legal proceeding. And I'm going to use it to make sure she understands the consequences of making private matters public." "You're going to blackmail her." "I'm going to educate her about the dangers of escalation." That evening, I sat in my apartment wondering if I'd made the right choice. Giving Margaret the information about Andrea's college embezzlement felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But Andrea had crossed lines too. Ethical lines, professional lines, marital lines. Maybe it was time for consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk tomorrow. 10 a.m., public garden. Come alone. Andrea." Andrea wanted to meet. After days of avoiding my calls, she was ready to talk. I texted back, "I'll be there." The next morning was crisp and clear, with the kind of autumn light that made Boston's public garden look like an impressionist painting. I found Andrea sitting on a bench near the pond, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down beside her. "You said we needed to talk. Neil, this has to stop. The public humiliation, the professional destruction, the systematic dismantling of everything I've worked for. It has to stop. I'm not dismantling anything. I'm just refusing to be invisible while you conduct your affairs." Affairs? It's not affairs, plural. It's one relationship that got complicated. Complicated? You mean public? Andrea turned to face me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Fear. "Margaret Feldman came to see me yesterday," she said quietly. "Did she?" "She knows things, Neil. Things about my past that could destroy everything I've built." "What kind of things?" "You know what kind of things." So Andrea knew that I knew about the college embezzlement. The secret she'd buried for over 2 decades was now a weapon in someone else's hands. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to conduct a public affair with her husband. I never meant for it to become public. I never wanted to hurt you or embarrass our family. But you did it anyway. I did it because I was unhappy. Because I felt invisible in my own marriage. Because I needed to feel wanted and appreciated and alive. So you found someone who made you feel that way? Yes. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way I handled it. Sorry for the month of silence. Sorry for making you feel like you didn't matter. It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from her since this whole situation began. But it was also too late. "What do you want from me, Andrea?" "I want you to call off Margaret Feldman. I want you to stop the public campaign against my reputation. And I want us to handle this divorce privately, without destroying each other in the process." "What are you offering in return?" "A fair settlement. Reasonable alimony. Shared custody of our relationship with Chloe. No fighting over the business or the house or the retirement accounts." It was a generous offer, more generous than I'd expected. But it was also an admission of weakness. Andrea was scared. "I'll think about it," I said. "Neil, please. I know I hurt you. I know I handled this badly. But we can still end this with some dignity intact." I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Ambitious, intelligent, beautiful, and flawed in ways I was only beginning to understand. "I'll give you an answer tomorrow," I said. That evening, I called Margaret Feldman. "She came to you," Margaret said when I told her about the meeting. "She's scared." "She should be. I haven't even started yet." "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to make sure she understands that some games have consequences she's not prepared for." "Margaret, maybe we should consider her offer. End this before it gets any worse." "Worse for whom?" "Your wife destroyed my marriage, humiliated me publicly, and turned my husband into a professional pariah. Why should I make things easier for her? Because revenge has a way of consuming everyone involved." "This isn't revenge, Neil. This is justice. And justice requires that people face the consequences of their choices." After hanging up, I sat in my apartment and tried to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. Someone who accepted a reasonable settlement and moved on with his life, or someone who pursued complete victory regardless of the collateral damage. My phone rang. Chloe's number. "Dad, Mom's been crying for 2 days. What's happening?" "Your mother and I are negotiating the terms of our divorce. She says you're trying to destroy her career." "I'm trying to protect my own interests." "Dad, I know she hurt you. I know she made mistakes. But she's still my mother, and she's still the woman you loved enough to marry. People change, sweetheart." Yes, they do. But that doesn't mean they stop being human. After hanging up, I walked to my window and looked out at the harbor. Ships were moving through the channel, following routes that had been navigated for centuries. I had a choice to make. I could accept Andrea's offer and end this conflict with some dignity intact, or I could continue the campaign that Margaret Feldman was orchestrating. But then something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen, a photographer I'd reconnected with at a gallery opening weeks ago. Saw your conference presentation online. Bold move. Coffee tomorrow if you need to talk to someone who's been through the wars. I stared at the message, surprised by how much I wanted to say yes. Sarah represented something different, not revenge or destruction, but the possibility of building something new. Coffee sounds good, I typed back. 10:30 at Thinking Cup? See you there. Tomorrow, I would make my decision. Tonight, I needed to figure out what kind of person I wanted to be when all of this was over. The next morning, I met Sarah at the coffee shop in the North End. She was already there, studying the menu with the same intensity she probably brought to her photography. You've had quite a week, she said as I sat down. That's an understatement. I watched the video. Very dramatic. Very public. Very un-Neil-like. People change. Do they? Or do circumstances just force them to show who they really are? We talked for an hour about choices and consequences, about the difference between justice and revenge, about the kind of people we wanted to be when the dust settled. Here's what I learned from my divorce, Sarah said. You can win every battle and still lose the war. You can destroy your ex-spouse and destroy yourself in the process. Or you can choose to walk away with your humanity intact. She doesn't deserve mercy. This isn't about what she deserves. It's about who you want to be. After coffee, I walked to the public garden to meet Andrea. She was already there, sitting on the same bench, looking like she hadn't slept in days. I've made a decision, I said without preamble. She looked up at me, hope and fear warring in her eyes. I'll accept your settlement offer on one condition. What condition? You leave my business alone. No claims to Carter and Associates, no attempts to value or divide the company. It's mine, completely and entirely. That's fair, she said quickly. I agree. And you need to understand something. What you did, the affair, the silence, the public humiliation, that destroyed something that can never be rebuilt. We're done, Andrea. Completely done. This isn't a pause or a break. This is the end. I know, she said, and I heard genuine sadness in her voice. I know what I destroyed. Then we have an agreement. I stood to leave, but she stopped me with a hand on my arm. Neil, for what it's worth, I did love you. Once. I lost my way. We both did, I said. But now we get to find new paths. I called Margaret Feldman from my apartment. I'm accepting Andrea's settlement offer, I told her. I'm ending this. You're making a mistake. We could destroy her completely. I don't want to destroy anyone anymore. I just want to move on. That's weakness talking. No, it's wisdom. Revenge feels good in the moment, but it's poison in the long run. I've spent enough time being poisoned. Margaret was silent for a long moment. I suppose I understand, she said finally. For what it's worth, you fought well. You made them pay for what they did. I made them accountable. There's a difference. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment and felt something shift inside me. The anger that had fueled me for weeks was finally starting to dissipate, replaced by something quieter but more sustainable. Acceptance. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane Murphy. Andrea's attorney just called. They're ready to move forward with the settlement. Well done. I texted back, thank you for everything. Then I opened my laptop and began sketching designs for a new project, not a commission, but something personal. A small community center in an underserved neighborhood, The kind of project that wouldn't make much money but would make a difference. Sarah was right. The best revenge wasn't destruction. It was building a life so good that my ex-wife would realize what she'd lost. 6 months later, I stood at the groundbreaking ceremony for the community center, surrounded by local officials, neighborhood residents, and my team from Carter and Associates. The project had attracted attention from architectural journals, not because it was lucrative, but because it represented something Boston needed: architecture with a social conscience. "This is impressive," Sarah said, standing beside me with her camera. She'd been documenting the entire process, from invisible to making a real impact. Turns out being forced to rebuild your life gives you perspective on what actually matters. Chloe appeared at my elbow, no longer torn between warring parents but genuinely proud. "Dad, the mayor wants a photo with you." "How's your mother?" I asked as we walked toward the assembled dignitaries. "She's okay. She left the law firm, started her own practice. Smaller, quieter. I think the whole experience humbled her. And Mark. Divorced. Margaret took him for everything he had. He's working at some mid-level firm in Worcester now." Justice, it seemed, had found its own path. That evening, I met Sarah for dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the North End. Over the past 6 months, we'd fallen into an easy companionship, not rushing into anything, but enjoying the possibility of something more. "I saw Andrea today," she said carefully. "At the courthouse. She was filing paperwork for her new practice." "How did she look?" "Older. Tired. But maybe a little wiser." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Andrea. I saw the article about your community center in the Globe. It's beautiful work. I'm proud of what you're building. I'm sorry I couldn't see it before." I showed Sarah the message. "Are you going to respond?" I thought about it for a moment, then typed back, "Thank you. I hope you find what you're looking for too." It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. But it wasn't hatred either. It was acknowledgement that we'd both been flawed people trying to navigate a failing marriage. The difference was what we chose to build from the ruins. 3 months later, Carter and Associates won a major contract to design a new hospital wing, the biggest project in the firm's history. "Turns out refusing to stay invisible has its advantages," Janet said during the celebration. "Turns out having principles and sticking to them matters," I corrected. That evening, Sarah and I walked along the harbor, the same route I'd walked alone so many times during the darkest months. "I've been thinking," she said, taking my hand, "about us. About taking this from companionship to something more. And I think I'm ready if you are. But I need to know you're choosing me, not running from her." I stopped and turned to face her. I spent 18 years in a marriage where I was taken for granted, where I became invisible. I don't want to repeat that pattern. If we do this, I want to do it right. That's all I needed to hear. We kissed there on the harbor walk, the city lights reflecting off the water. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't defined by my failed marriage. I was Neil Carter, architect, father, and someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something better. The end.